Welcome. Imagine having a supernatural power on your side to help you through each day. This episode of Second Breakfast is brought to you by your higher power. Your higher power is free and ready to tap into it anytime. The only cost will be honesty. I use my higher power every day to pray for others and to ask for help. But most of all, I use my higher power to give thanks. You will be amazed at the changes in your life if you allow yourself to use this eternal free service. And we will be right back with the show right after the intro. All right, we have a lot to get through today. Welcome to Second Breakfast. This is a stream of consciousness that fills part of the gap between the nap, the no answer period, where I cover the question period, and Blazing Cat for Fridays, where we do that at 9 o'clock instead of this. We are streaming on 3 platforms, Rumble, X, and YouTube, so please give us a like, thumbs up, follow, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. The chat is up across all 3 platforms, so please feel free to ask anything. Comments drive the algorithm, and I'm not driving it down with my forbidden words. This is veteran. Appreciate your support, so please visit my channels and share. I hope you're having a wonderful morning and are ready to face the day with hope and love of your fellow man. I'm looking out the window and it's sunny right now after, an evening of some rather not nice temperatures starting yesterday. We've, 4 to 6 inches of snow, some freezing temperatures, but this will all be melted because it's March and spring is just around the corner. Outstanding. So what have we got stored today? Well, we'll cover Ezra's interview with Bruce Pardy, who explains how Daniel Smith will defeat Alberta independence movement. Unless Albertans realize what he's saying, I guess. And Michael Geist's analysis of Bill C-22. Liberals want you as perpetual victims and refuse to allow you to defend yourself against their violent voter base they've allowed into the country. Millions of them, apparently. And if you stick around, I'll tell you of my experience as an apiarist. But first, let's visit a snippet of what's recently happening in Canada. So video went up yesterday on latest episode of Screw You Seniors as we continue to cover the old age security questions in the lower house as to why they spent $6.6 billion on Curam software when the same system was employed in other countries with the same problems we're experiencing here, and they were warned that we were going to have these problems, and yet they went ahead anyway. So there's questions like, when we see the documents, and the Liberals, as usual, are like, no, you're a mushroom, you will live in darkness, you are not entitled to see the documents, even though this is $6.6 billion of your own tax money. Well, let's get into the first story here. Jasmine Lane says, genuine question, Canada is seeing incredible amounts of people using food banks these days, and with an economic situation that has continued to get worse despite cherry-picked data talking points. How close are we to experiencing a situation where food banks close their doors? Yeah, that's the next point right there. So that's inevitably what happens in a civilization collapse is food riots. Once the food riots happen, that's it gets pretty bad. Unless, of course, first you have water riots. But luckily, we are blessed with lots of water in Canada. But, that still didn't stop scurvy from breaking out last year in Canada, out in the West. Yeah. In a Liberals writing, of all things, as well. Scurvy in Canada today. Imagine that. Didn't have that before. Another Liberal achievement. Melanie in Saskatchewan writes a little missive here that pretty well explains how a lot of people think. I learned something about myself today, she writes. I can no longer be in public spaces with anyone who has no idea who Mark Carney is. Doesn't know or believe all the connections between Brookfield, Carney, and the last year of cronyism that will directly benefit Carney's personal Brookfield portfolio, and has come here visiting Saskatchewan from Alberta and thinks Pierre Poilievre is the same as Trump. No effing wonder liberals have been getting elected for the past 11 years. We have brain-dead morons running amok without a clue, spewing CBC headlines at random strangers. My daughter just witnessed her mother standing in cereal aisle of a small-town co-op grocery store, raising my voice to a 70-year-old woman to get the F away from me and go educate herself. The look on her face was one of abject surprise and entitlement. I don't think she used to being called out and told off, at least not in public. The whole store heard it. And then the icing on the cake, going through the checkout with a clerk who clearly heard it all and asked me, who is Mark Carney? I can't even. I came very close to having to crowdfund for bail. We finally get in the truck, and as I put the key in the ignition, Davida does a literal facepalm. Then she looked at me and said, she's 70. There's no reason why she doesn't know Carney is bad for Canada. For context, Davida is 11 years old. So I apologized to her in case I embarrassed her in the store. Her reply, I'm not embarrassed. I was worried who would drive my bagel bites home if the cops came. Just another story in Canada that we would not have heard unless, of course, the Liberals were not in power. So Mario Zelaya writes, Mark Garretson said he was leaving X because he couldn't handle the truth. So now he's posting videos on Facebook where his 12 blue sky followers can agree with him in peace. Remember, this is the guy, if you watched the show yesterday, that ran away from somebody at a mall because they were asking him questions. And he was like, I'm having a private conversation, leave me alone. And this older woman is like, no, you're in public. I pay for you. You're going to answer these questions. And of course, he ran away, scurrying away. Right? All the same questions, pretty well. They're being asked in question period that they refuse to answer. So they try with the same talking points in public, and when that doesn't work, they scurry away. Or, of course, they just ban themselves from. And then, like he says here, I'll post stuff on Facebook, or the faces I like to call it, so that your own echo chamber can listen to you. And MPs across the floors are just only human following their own selfish desires, according to him. Bro literally admitted it has nothing to do with constituents. Well, let's listen to Garrettson's own words. I believe this is near the end of this video, so we don't have to listen to the whole bloody thing.
Every time a member of parliament crosses the floor in Canada, you can set your watch by the reaction. Conservatives and the NDP sprint to the nearest microphone to declare crossers when they're the ones receiving them. Suddenly, it's not a scandal, it's a principled stand, a courageous choice, a moment of clarity. Funny how the moral compass always points toward whichever caucus door just opened. So maybe the real issue isn't backroom deals. Maybe it's that some parties only like democracy when it stays put. MPs are humans, humans move, and sometimes they move away from you. And honestly, instead of making wild accusations every time someone leaves, maybe take a breath and ask yourselves why they're leaving in the first place. A little self-reflection might be more productive than another red.
A liberal telling us to self-reflect when they refuse to answer questions, when they refuse to provide documents when asked for, when they have to do everything in darkness, hide everything, keep it away from us. Force us to do freedom of access to information only to be given documents that are heavily redacted, only for them to choose who is real media and who isn't. So when they answer questions, they can just say, well, you're not real media. I don't need to talk to you. These virtue signaling class clowns are going to tell us to do self-reflection. Completely clueless. Kingston, you're just down the road from me. Would you wake the hell up? Richard Toronto says, I am Canadian. My grandparents came to this country as immigrants, looking for a better life. They arrived with nothing and were given nothing by our government, nor did they ask for anything. My grandfathers worked hard. One opened a business with partners. The other worked a large company. My grandmother stayed home and raised their families. They learned English. They paid taxes. They followed the rules and the laws of the land. They continued to freely practice their religion and continue their traditions, while also embracing Canadian values and immersing themselves in Canadian society. My parents were born here. They too had the freedom to practice their religion, celebrate their holidays, continue their parents' traditions while living a Canadian life. I grew up here. I stood and sang "Oh Canada" every morning. Never loved the song, but always sang it proudly. I celebrated Canada Day. I learned about Canadian history, Canadian geography, Canadian government. I learned about Canada. I went to school with people from different countries, different religions, different cultures, different skin colors. We all played together. We all hung out together. We were all friends. I grew up in one of the safest countries in the world. We worried about nothing. I grew up in one of the friendliest countries in the world. Canada was known for being polite, saying sorry, for being amenable. Nobody hated us. We had a great reputation in the world. When American kids traveled, they'd often put the Canadian flag on their backpacks because they'd be treated better. It was great. Great place to live. A great place to raise a family. I don't recognize our country anymore. The hate, the rhetoric, the violence, the lack of safety and security. This is not the Canada my grandparents immigrated to. This is not the Canada I grew up in. This is not the Canada I plan to raise children in. We are at war right now. Us Canadians here in Canada. We are at war with an ideology that wishes to wipe out and destroy us and everything we stand for. They wish to replace Canada with an Islamic state and Sharia law, forcing everyone to convert to Islam or be killed. I'm not making this up. They've told us. If we want to save Canada, we need to stand up against them. We need to speak up against them. We need to be contacting our elected officials and telling them that they need to save Canada. We have to be united. Right now, we cannot be letting things like our opinion on the war divide us. If we do, Islam will win. We have to focus on coming together as Canadians to fight for our country, Canada. The Canada we were born in or choose to come to. The Canada we help to build. The Canada we know and love. The Canada we need. I am Canadian, and I will not stay silent or stay still while my Canada is destroyed. Lights, Rich, Toronto. Many things there, of course. I've been saying and repeated for the last 2 decades, for which I was called a racist, pointing out these very things that people are finally cluing into, right? Why is this being said? Well, maybe because Westerners have become second-class citizens in their own countries. A public school in Calgary banned all food from its cafeteria and lunchroom during Ramadan. Ramadan ding bong. Westerners were told it was inappropriate to say Merry Christmas. Now, those same Westerners are expected to surrender public spaces to others so others can practice their religion. The Freedom Convoy faced wartime measures to suppress constitutional rights while Al-Quds Day protesters enjoy freedom of expression. Across the Atlantic, and the pattern becomes even clearer. Pakistani grooming gangs were covered up, while UK citizens are jailed for offensive social media posts. In fact, yesterday we showed you how coppers were waiting at the airport to arrest somebody coming back home to the UK for posting memes. Yeah, for posting something on the internet that offended somebody. 6 cops at the airport, take them away. Meanwhile, rape has been out of control in their country by migrants. Like, oh no, let's grab that person at the airport who's probably doing a meme about that. Pakistani grooming gangs were covered up. Exactly. So Western courts increasingly hand out lighter sentences to violent offenders based on race. None of this is compassion. This is the slow inversion of a civilization. Everything that we warned is now happening. While most prefer neutrality in the Iran war, many in the Gen Z cohort think Canada should support the Iranian regime, according to a new poll. Well, we know about polls. Polls are just a very small sampling, and we can't really trust most of these polling companies. But this is disturbing regardless, that there's even a group of people in Canada who would be supporting Iran. The mullahs, who massacred and murdered their own citizens. The regime that hangs homosexuals from cranes in public displays of religious jurisprudence to show everyone else, if you're gay, we're going to hang you from a crane in public. That's who these people are supporting. Give your head a shake. François-Philippe Champagne, the most hubristic CNX Tuesday in Parliament, in the Liberal Party. If you've ever listened to him, if you've ever watched any of my no answer period intros, which are really just a running comic strip, you will see him in there just doing his signature move in Parliament, which is, I take no lessons from the Conservatives. Yes, that annoying little troll who doesn't read contracts when he signs them, by the way, therefore leaving Canada on the hook for billions, giving it away to the auto industry. That little contract thing, that they said, oh yeah, we'll give you all kinds of money with no sureties that company was going to stay in Canada. Just gave them billions. Yeah, no problem. Hey, this is my money. It's other people's money. I believe in Canada, he says. Right, so great news, Mr. Speaker. We are building Canada strong. Fucking slogans with this guy. Always, every day, for generations to come. So, throwing away here some more money at their cronies. Here we go again. François-Philippe Champagne has a very good record of picking winners and losers. Well, he's good at picking losers. When we are getting that Medicago investment back, or about the contract given to SNC Lavalin, now called Alta. Well, those guys building the train across Canada to help build the Medicago facilities in Champagne's riding. $250 million quickly and quietly erased from the taxpayer's purse. These people, remember, he took over Chrétien's riding, another long-term Liberal riding that seems to be just filled full of corruption. That's why they keep voting for them. That's why they have all that money there to pay for the advertisement to keep the train going, right? Because they're stealing money from the purse. And then they refuse to hand over the documents. And finally, when they're forced to hand it over, it's heavily redacted. These people are criminals. And of course, when he's in committee, you can listen. What I would like to say, I would frame it something differently. Well, I want to help you. I want to help you understand. No, we don't want you to help us. We want you to answer a goddamn question. Or at least provide the documents. That would be nice too. Recent StatsCan data confirms this trend. Indeed. Total general government debt, gross debt per capita to hit. Creeping up on 100 grand. Right? Oh, it will be over 100 grand. Right, crosses 100 grand in fourth quarter 2025. Look at that. Canada's government debt per person used to be 47 grand. Now it's creeping up on 100 grand. Yay. Told ya. Liberals, all they do is spend. Spend. It's not their money. They don't care. They've increased the debt by more than all other prior governments combined. Yay! And that was even before the last election. And still, the Albozos voted them back in. And still, they spend like drunken sailors on meth nonstop. My apologies to drunken sailors comparing them to liberals. Holly Doan writes documents. Climate panel that recommended Canadians walk or take the bus to work build 183 grand flights to Brazil. Yes, it's not about the climate change. It's about communism. That's why China doesn't have any climate change policies, because they already have communism, right? But up until then, these grifters will just suck the money out of the public purse so they can go on their binges. Meanwhile, Lisa writes, February 2nd, 2026, Trump got a $500 billion energy deal with India. And of course, our prime minister traveled and gave $100 million to Indian students for full ride scholarships in Canada. So that's the kind of deals liberals do, is just because it's not their money. It's other people's money. There's no penalties for them. They don't have to prove anything that they do. Never. And even when they break the law, there's nobody there to stop them because they control the law as well. Today, Trump signed an energy deal with Japan, $56 billion. And then what did Carney come back with? A strategic partnership. And Lisa writes, whatever the F that is, yeah. Hey, we have another agreement. I have a piece of paper. I remember that from World War II. No, from history. No, I wasn't there, World War II. Remember that guy went over the seas, made a deal with Hitler? I have a piece of paper. Right here, we have peace on paper. That's all these liberals do, is put crap on paper. And then they put a big black marker over top of it and hand it over to you and say, here, this is how we spend your money. And you're looking at a paper full of black ink covered up with big black marker that you can't read or see anything. And then if you complain about it, they tell you you're a criminal. You're building a bunch of nothing, writes Lisa. Canada is getting passed over for the U.S. on major trade deals because every potential trading partner knows damn well what they want. Canada cannot deliver, thanks to bad ideology-driven policies. Indeed. Of course, seeing as that they purchased the media, most people don't know this. Jeff Everly writes, the challenges to the Nova Scotia woods ban are scheduled for this week in Halifax. Now, if you don't know Jeff Everly, Jeff had enough. When the Nova Scotia said, you can't go in the woods because you might spontaneously combust. The first time ever in the history of Canada, the government decided that you were too dangerous as a human being to be in the woods on your own to make an intelligent adult decision whether or not it was safe to be in the woods, that the government had to full nanny state you into subjection and saying, if you go in the woods, we will find you. It's not safe for you to be in the woods. So he said, screw that. So he went in the woods. And then he was like, looking at the people who are supposed to issue these tickets. He goes, can you see me? Hello, I'm out in the woods. Still safe. Hello, it's me. Then he went into the building and said, are you going to give me the fine? Like you saw me in the woods. So anyway, here we are. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has filled its application in my private interest. The Canadian Constitutional Foundation filed theirs in the public interest. Personally, I think this is about as good of a shot as we've had at winning back our freedoms. The hearings are scheduled for March 17, 18, and 19 from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia time. A previous attempt by Everly to challenge the constitutionality of the province's woods travel bans enacted temporarily in 2016 and 2023 during the wildfire seasons was ultimately thrown out by the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia because he hadn't been charged with anything. So that's why he went in the woods. No, it's me. Charge me. I need to take this to court. So on August 8, Everly went to the Department of Natural Resource office on Mountain Road in Fox Heath, told the officers he intended to violate the ban, and then walked into the bushes outside as they watched. He then came out and thanked the officers for charging him. Outstanding, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. And go follow him, go visit him, and whoever is the Constitutional Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, if you want to support him, go and support them. They've taken up this challenge. These are the people that we need in our country. These are real Canadians, not the criminal cartel running the government. Speaking of criminal cartels, last thing they want is for you to be able to defend yourself against their fury. So, self-defense MP Lip confirms the Liberal government will not support legal protections for Canadians acting in self-defense in the case of violent home invasion. We want to create a system where people feel they have the right to shoot and kill somebody. Oh, what? No, that's what the F is wrong with you? Nobody wants to end somebody else's life. Well, nobody's sane. Nobody's not a psychopath. Nobody wants to live with that for the rest of their life, but they certainly want to be able to protect themselves and threaten that kind of force if necessary to protect oneself. What, we're just supposed to lay back and take it? He's a 38-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. That's a pretty hard sell to me. Yeah, stupid. See you next Tuesday. Well, let's listen to her. What is she saying?
A system where people feel they have the right to shoot and kill somebody.
People understand people's fear of being victimized in their home. People are concerned to leave their children at home at night when they go out, and it's absolutely an issue.
We have the self-defense.
That's always interesting to hear a cop say that when you know that cop's got a gun strapped to his hip. He's not afraid. He's got full law behind him to use all what's at his disposal to protect himself, but not Johnny Public.
Time, and there is a terminology used as a reasonable force, which was a point of discussion across the globe. Like there is a question on the reasonable force. Can you commit Canadians that if any homeowner won't be charged if armed intruders enter their property? Because that's a concern with many of the Canadians across Canada, that midnight home invasions, that with the armed intruders and homeowners were charged, even though we had the self-defense laws. So can you commit, and what is the solution for this self-defense? Thank you.
Yeah. So first off, I would start by saying that self-defense is a defense in Canada. It exists. Regardless of the information and a lot of the conversations that have been happening, that people that have been coming up to me, there has become an understanding or a belief that people are not allowed to defend themselves in Canada. It is well established that you can defend yourself in Canada. What the level of force that is used in order to defend yourself is what can be at question. So your question, I think, is one for perhaps even law enforcement in some ways, because every case is different, and it depends on when an officer comes to the scene and what may have happened in those circumstances. So if somebody...
So what she's saying is a lie. An intruder comes into my home and my training kicks in, and I decide to end them because I feel my life is in threat, and this is just a normal reaction after 38 years of military service. I will be charged with murder because I ended them in my life, even though they broke into my house for whatever nefarious reasons that they broke into my house. Because I defended myself and ended them, I will be charged with murder. So what she's saying is a complete lie.
For example, is murdered at somebody's residence. There should be an investigation at that murder scene. And to say that there should be no investigation and nobody should have the ability to lay charges, I think would go too far.
See, right off the bat, there is a presumption that the homeowner is guilty. She calls it a murder scene, not a crime scene, not a break-in scene, not a violation of the homeowner scene, not an invasion, not an intrusion, but no, it's automatically now a murder scene. Let's not look at a reason why that person wasn't supposed to be there in the first place, why they broke in, why it was a break-in. It was a break-in where a death occurred, not a murder scene, right? But your default to calling it murder means that you automatically assume that any homeowner who defends himself is a murderer. You just bloody said it on TV, you cow.
Within the Canadian system, and even those that say that the U.S. has such laws, that does not exist across the U.S. as well. And in the states that it does, they have seen incidents where innocent victims, people who are, mistakenly going to the wrong house to pick up their little brother. There have been many cases that I could list that I've looked into, and we don't want to create a system where people feel that they have the right to shoot and kill somebody.
So their take on this is completely wrong. Completely wrong. Because the far left ideology insists that only they know what's good for you. The far left ideology treats everyone like children. They don't trust other adults to be adults. They don't trust law-abiding citizens to be law-abiding citizens. They think everyone is a potential criminal, according to them. Just waiting to break a liberal law. And if they haven't created one, they will. They will create that law to ensure that you do break it so that you have to be on your back heels all the time. Because that's how they operate. They have to keep people off balance all the time. This is the only way they can get elected. It's the only way they can manipulate the minds, the tiny little minds of the liberal voter. All right, let's move on. Can't listen to any more of her. I have enough of listening to her in Parliament. Nicholas Elsher, MPH, writes, breaking federal judge shuts down childhood vaccine reform. Now, this is in the States. Blocks of vaccine schedule overhaul from 17 to 11 vaccines. Blocks ending universal newborn hepatitis B shots. Suspends new ACIP committee, nullifies ACIP votes since June. U.S. District Judge Brian E. Murphy has made a grave mistake, he writes. As a result, the previous CDC childhood hyper-vaccination schedule remains in effect for now. The ruling is not a final decision and is expected to be appealed. The biopharmaceutical complex remains fully operational. Remember what we said yesterday? They're changing the name of vaccines into biogenetics. Yeah. So be careful to what you sign. Now, for those of you who believe in vaccines, that's fine. That's fine. I'm going to show you a picture. All right. Boom. Look at this picture right here. Right. This is all the pharmaceutical injections. See all these little jabbies? Jab, 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 jab. All these jabs. These are all the jabs, over 100, that Big Pharma is making money from injecting in human bodies from the time they're born to the age of 21, I believe. So that's not even the other later vaccines and boosters. Now, when I was born in 1964, and when I went to school, elementary school, by the time I graduated high school, I think I'd had about 8 or 9 shots. That's about all I needed. Now, apparently, you need 114. Of course, after I joined the military, I had another half dozen I had to take, plus boosters. I stopped when it came to the fraudulent COVID-19 vaccine because at that point, well, it was new technology, and the 20 years of lab apparently trials on animals had led to nothing but sepsis and heart failure. And sepsis was a coy name for systemic organ failure, really. So then, of course, I started looking deeper and deeper into vaccines, and I realized that, oh my goodness, look at all the stuff that's actually in these things. Oh, look at the risk-benefit analysis. Oh, wait, look, there's no program to support those that are vaccine injured. And then you find out that there's been a long history of vaccine injuries that people have just been assuming are natural illnesses that can be now tied directly to these injections, which is why Make America Healthy Again has been looking at these vaccines and saying, why? Why do we need these? You didn't need these before. A lot of the conditions, the human conditions that improved life and lengthened life was actually due to living in a cleaner society. Not because Big Pharma started injecting things into your body. A lot of data to look at, but regardless, all these things, right? The human body wasn't designed to have all these, but for some reason, now, apparently, in order to be a human being, you have to have all these things. Well, that's the human being in the current society that requires you to be fully injected, to be a participant. That's a story for something else, for another day. We have still more to cover here. Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, Rights Global Affairs Canada is using the Qualified Canadian Journalism Organization designation as a way to refuse to answer questions from independent media. We mentioned this yesterday. Under this approach, federal officials could simply decline to respond to questions from outlets such as Rebel News, Juno News, Western Standard, the Epoch Times, on the grounds that they are not government-recognized journalism organizations. You know, Rebel News has more subscribers than CBC has watchers on a daily basis. Journalists working for outlets that do not receive government funding can be legally ignored or treated as though they are a legitimate member of the press. This violates the spirit and perhaps also the letter of the freedom of the press protected under Section 2B of the Charter, which guarantees freedoms of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedoms of the press and other media of communication. Government should not adopt policies that effectively privileges journalists working for taxpayer-subsidized media outlets that necessarily have a pro-government bias. Watch the full description here for a deeper conversation about the implications of this policy and what it can mean for independent media in Canada. They write, and of course, there's a link here to their YouTube channel. This is an ongoing problem in Canada. This is a problem the Liberals created. This is a problem that is exacerbated by the fact that in 2019, Justin Trudeau removed the requirement for media to tell the truth. There are no penalties for the media to lie to you. And now that the media is mostly government funded in Canada, they can lie to you and your money from your pockets is being paid to lie to you. Lies! Nothing but lies! Right, so let's listen to Bruce Party here describe to us how Daniel Smith will defeat the Alberta independence movement with the formation of the question of independence on the referendum. Let's go.
Lurking with respect to the independence quest, and that is that the referendum that Daniel Smith has announced for October looks to be one thing and is actually threatening to be quite something else. On October 19th, Alberta will hold a referendum that will ask the people of Alberta a whole series of questions, a series of policy questions and a series of constitutional questions. Those questions look to be very important to, the way, the track that Alberta chooses to be on. Here's the problem. That referendum, as it has been framed, in my opinion, is the way to defeat Alberta independence.
And why is that?
Here's why. So think of the Alberta population right now basically as in thirds. And I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but let's just do it this way. Let's say roughly a third are strongly in favor of independence. A third is strongly against. And the outcome of a referendum on independence will depend upon that middle third. There are an awful lot of Albertans who are not happy with the status quo in this country, but they're not quite convinced that that independence is the way yet. They're not quite ready to ditch the country. So here's how the referendum will work. They are going to be given a whole series of questions that look like Alberta has a third choice. And the third choice is, we'll fix these policy areas, and then we'll vote on these 4 or 5 constitutional amendments. Like one of them, for example, how about we abolish the unelected Senate? And this middle third of Albertans may well think that there is a third choice. We can fix things, but not have to leave the country. So let's do that. Problem is this. Those choices don't really exist. Mm-hmm. If you vote in favor of constitutional amendments like this, nothing is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Alberta held a referendum in I think it was 2021 on equalization, and 62% of Albertans voted in favor of removing equalization from the Canadian Constitution. What happened? Nothing. Mm-hmm. Alberta has been talking for decades about a Triple E Senate. What has happened? Nothing.
We won't be fooled again. Apparently they will, because apparently people get fooled every election. They always buy the lie. He makes very valid points. They're going to try any argument to try to win. But yeah, look at what they do. Always look at the past. What have they done so far? Sweet F.A. Nothing. Nothing at all. Right, let's cover this next story here on Bill C-22. Now, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom Rights Through Bill C-22, the federal government tells electronic service providers, we're coming for Canadians' internet data. You're going to make it easy for us, and mum's the word. Bill C-22, introduced in Parliament on March 12th, would enact the Supporting Authorized Access to Information Act. This legislation will establish significant federal government control over internet platforms like Google or X, and telecommunications and internet providers like TELUS or Rogers, and anyone else providing an electronic service in Canada. That's a long list indeed. Now, they go through here and they talk about Michael Geist. Now, Michael Geist has done a review, and he plans on doing more in-depth review on other parts of the bill. And of course, here they also mention that if you have any concerns about this bill, you should be contacting your member of parliament. It is so easy to find out who your members of parliament are. Indeed, ourcommons.ca, or you can find a link if you just put in Parleview, Parliament of Canada. It's very easy to find out who, and of course, write them all. Write all the senators as well. Write every single last one of them. And if you're in the Canadian Armed Forces, you're limited to writing to only your MP, but you can also write to all the senators. Now, here's the actual bill. A lot of things in there. You can go through and you can read. It's all in very basic act legislative language. I've had to go through several bills in my career. Well, most of all, the National Defense Act. And every time there's amendments to it, when I was in the military. And of course, in my interest in politics, I was reading all kinds of other acts. And then, of course, if you're working in the Royal Canadian Air Force, well, then you get involved in reading a lot of things regarding acts for aviation. And then, of course, then you go down rabbit holes in other areas. Of course, there's acts on the environment and, for disposing of chemicals. It's just, there's so many things in the aviation industry. And the next thing you know, you're so involved in reading into government policy that you're like, what am I, a bloody bureaucrat? Anyway, so Michael Geist here, this is what he looks like. His profile picture from his faculty member at, as a full professor, common law at Ottawa U. And he has a website where he's posted his latest breakdown of this Bill C-22. So he writes, lawful access returns with changes to warrantless access, but dangerous backdoor surveillance risks remain. Now, the decades-long battle over lawful access entered a new phase yesterday with the introduction of Bill C-22, the Lawful Access Act. This bill follows the attempt last spring to bury lawful access provisions in Bill C-2, a border measures bill that was the new government's, I hate when they say new government. We're a new government. You've been in power since 2015. You're not a new government. New government's first piece of substantive legislation. The lawful access elements of the bill faced an immediate backlash given the inclusion of unprecedented rules permitting widespread warrantless access to personal information. Those rules were on very shaky constitutional ground, and the government ultimately decided to hit the reset button on lawful access by proceeding with the border measures in a different bill. Lawful access never dies, however. Bill C-22 cover the two main aspects of lawful access: law enforcement access to personal information held by communication service providers such as ISPs and wireless providers, and the development of surveillance and monitoring capabilities within the Canadian networks. In fact, the bill is separated into two, with the first half dealing with the timely access to data and information, and the second establishing the Supporting Authorized Access to Information Act, the SAAIA. I anticipate providing extensive coverage of the bill on both this blog and my podcast, he writes. So let's get some more into the breakdown here. The government has scrapped that approach by shifting to a new confirmation of service demand power. Now, you may have seen that little flowchart I showed yesterday, which was just a couple of Chevron orders. Sorry, that did I just a little glitch there? Let's bring down our output. I knew this good luck stream couldn't carry on without having some issues. So if you've seen the Chevron flowchart I showed yesterday, whereby cops are like, maybe I should ask the service if that person is a customer. And they say no. And then they're like, okay, I guess we can go somewhere else. Because apparently cops before that would do all kinds of investigations in what a service provider was doing for somebody, only to find out that that service provider never actually provided service for that person. So I guess the cops are kind of worried, right? They're like, well, we can't let them know we're investigating one of their customers because, well, then they could let that customer know. So basically, this legislation will basically go to service providers. Now the service providers will be, under this law, unable to tell their customers that the police are accessing their private information, investigating them. That's basically what this entire thing, well, from what I could read in this breakdown, actually does. So the definition of an ESP, person that individually or as part of a group provides an electronic service, including for the purpose of enabling communications, and that A, provides the service to persons in Canada, or B, carries on all or part of its business activities in Canada. So basically, you're on the internet and you access a service on another country because, well, you can access it through the internet. Well, now automatically they're going to fall under this legislation, according to them. Electronic service includes a service. That's pretty broad. A service. We're providing you a service. Remember, people don't understand that the origins of the word servicing were applied to a stallion servicing the mare out on the ranch, if you know what I mean. So when the government is providing you a service, or anyone is providing you a service, I hope you're being properly rogered. So a service, a feature or of a service, a feature of a service, pictures? That involves the creation, recording, storage, processing, transmission, reception, emission, or making available of information in electronic, digital, or any other intangible form by an electronic, digital, magnetic, optical, biometric, acoustic, or other technological means, or a combination of any such means. So I think acoustic here, I think they're actually covering frequency. Okay. All electronic service providers are subjected to obligations to provide all reasonable assistance in any prescribed time and manner to permit the assessment or testing of any device, equipment, or other thing that may enable an authorized person to access information. Moreover, all are required to keep such requests secret. 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 I wish I had a little echo button on this there. Secret, secret, secret. Because that pretty well explains everything the liberals do, right? Because they do everything in secret. They want everything done in secret. Now, of course, they're going to say, it's for your safety. For your safety, mind you. Just like all the Nazis said in 1930s Germany, it's for your safety. Science. Everything's done for your safety. Now, I understand criminal investigations do need to be done in some form of secrecy in order not to let the criminals know that they're being investigated. But in this case here, there's a reason for this. Why is this all happening? Why is everyone pushing? Well, of course, it happens to fit with the long-term goals of a far-left authoritarian dictatorship, because more control over information and ability to do everything in secret is great for them. But it just so happens that all of this is happening for a different reason, because of this. So the second additional protocol, the 2AP, the Budapest Convention and the U.S. Cloud Act are two distinct legal frameworks, global frameworks, designed to speed up cross-border law enforcement access to electronic evidence, replacing the slow traditional methods like mutual legal assistance treaties. Because it took time for people to access information between different police services. So this basically is them expediting, going after, the intent here is to go after real criminals that are exploiting this new technological communication system. And because they are hiding their criminal activities, so they want easier access to go after these criminals. Right? So that's broken down here. Multilateral international treaty under Council of Europe was the 2AP, which is why they mention this, right? Because Canada, for some reason, under the Liberals, wants to consider itself more European when we're not. We're descendants of some Europeans and a mishmash of many other people, but we are not European. Here's the U.S. Cloud Act, a U.S. domestic law that enables bilateral executive agreements. The scope is, in Budapest, one is for over 50 countries and primarily U.S.-based service providers and eligible for partners. So, of course, a lot of the technology that people use on the internet these days has been developed in the United States. Of course, people access these things from all over. It's going to be more than 50 countries, I can tell you that, which is why both of them are mentioned there. Let's go back to his description where they're doing everything in secret. My biggest concern is a new service that, of course, Rumble is now providing, the Rumble Wallet. So the way they describe this here, an electronic service, well, the Rumble wallet would fit into this. So if for whatever reason the Liberals decide that Rumble is violating the Digital Safety Act by evading using that service in a way that keeps the government from getting their digital services tax fee, guess what? They're going to be able to use this to go after people who are using Rumble Wallet to evade the DST. All right. And I believe that brings us to one last video on apiaries and being an apiarist. Now, if anyone doesn't know what an apiarist is, it's a beekeeper. So back a couple of decades ago, I was hoping that when I would retire on the last property that I had, I was going to get into beekeeping when I retired. I was slowly starting to collect the equipment here and there from prior and retired beekeepers, and slowly getting the information together. I actually took a course. It's very fascinating stuff, and it's you're basically wrangling bees, right? And you're providing them a home. And some interesting things about beekeepers is that they don't suffer from arthritis because they get stung. And there's something in the bee sting that actually helps. There's something in that toxin in the bee sting that actually helps for the inflammation that you get from joint arthritis. So that was interesting. And of course, there's the honey, outstanding, which is just the gift of gods. And then, of course, there's the hard parts, is that you have to protect the bees. And there's the bees' natural enemies are skunks and bears, black bears, in Canada, anyway. Most people don't know the difference between bees and hornets. That's another problem. Is people see something flying and big and buzzy, and they think it's nasty. Well, most bees don't really care about you whatsoever. They're only caring. They're busy. They're busy doing stuff for the hive. They have a short lifespan. Now, the queen bee, you don't want that queen getting away, which is why when you look at hives, there's a mesh in there that keeps the queen bee in but allows all the workers to get through, which is why they're out and about. Anybody who'd watched my gardening channel would have seen me trying to liberate bees from getting trapped in my squash flowers. It's the weirdest thing. The squash flower would actually just close around them like a Venus flytrap. And one day I was just out there noticing, and I was like, is there something in there? So I opened up the closed flower, and like a bee would fly out. So I would go out there every day to do my daily videos. And I would bring some scissors out, and I would just lop off the top of that closed flower, and every other flower is one or two bees would be flying out. I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, so all you gardeners out there, bees are great for pollination, and you need that for your garden. We need pollination. And these bees, I tell you, they have a problem with parasites, huge pie plate size parasites. This attach themselves to the body of the bees. It was an infection that came in from Europe because, well, that's where we got our honeybees from. And the biggest problem with those is that, well, they suck the blood out of the bee, so the bee's lifespan isn't as long. But the problem is if they pie plate size parasite gets on their face, and then of course, well, they can't eat. So the bees can't eat, can't get any moisture in them, then they die, and causes colony collapse. Beekeepers have been using a chemical that they've been putting in the hives to try to ward off those parasites, but they knew that would only last for so long. And of course, there's many other things in the environment that are not healthy for the bees, like the chemicals that big agriculture is using, which also poisons them as well. They have competitions from the local native bees as well. But all in all, bees are a wonderful thing. And here's a wonderful little video of how these beekeepers come in to collect the bees that have set up home in an overturned planter, how he does it, how he finds a queen bee. And I was just amazed at how he gets all the bees into a separate box. I don't know if he smoothed a little royal jelly in there, or he obviously put something in the box to attract them in there. Now, whenever you see him using the smoke as well, what that does is the bees, whenever they are exposed to smoke, they think there's a forest fire. So their first instinct is, we got to move the hive. So the first thing they do is they gorge themselves because, we got to travel, we got to work, we got to build a new hive, Who knows how long we're going to be gone? So everybody eat now. And then when you eat, what do you do when you eat a lot and you gorge yourself? Well, you don't want to move too fast, do you? You get a little logy, you get a little sleepy, and that's what happens with the bees. You think it calms them down, but it doesn't. They're just like, they're full of food, so they're a little logy and they move too slow. Sorry about that. Little choppiness there for a second. All right. So anyways, let's watch the video, and you'll be amazed.
Be as gentle as we can be. Oh my gosh. Oh, this is huge. Look how big this thing is. Maybe we'll get lucky and see the queen. Alright, I'm gonna move this over to there so that the customer can actually watch and see what's going on.
Get out.
It's a little heavy.
You're kidding.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Is that full?
Almost.
That's the net. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
That's beautiful.
Careful, I just saw one come in your house. Just saw the queen somewhere. She was over here. Oh, I see her. Ooh, come here, big mama. Come here, big mama. Oh, she's running. She's hiding. There she is.
Now, that little tool he's using is a special tool made specifically for hives, and they use that to slowly trim and cut around wherever the wax is. And there's this wax that seals the hive around the top of the lid in those hives themselves, and that particular wax itself is worth more than its weight in gold. Pharmaceutical companies, cosmetic industry buys that stuff at exorbitant prices. I mean, beekeepers probably make more money off that little strip of special wax seal that comes across the top of their hive than all this other work.
She's right here. Come on, get a little closer. Oh, got her. All right, big mama. Woo! Oh, looky there. The flower pot is free of bees. Now we can see that what normally would take a San Diego-sized swarm like a couple months to build this much honeycomb, this was only about 3 weeks old. So pretty wild. And let's see, let's pick up the box and see how many bees are in here. I can tell by the weight. A little duct tape, detach. Oh gosh, yeah, that's heavy. That's at least 20,000 bees. We're gonna set the box up back over here where, yep, there's some confused worker bees coming home. They're all over the place. So we're gonna go ahead and let them collect while I get to removing the comb. I just set the box down about 5 seconds ago, and look at them all.
Canada.
Well, thank you so much for watching the show. I really appreciate all my subscribers and followers on Rumble. I've gotten a few more subscribers and followers this week. This is outstanding. I really appreciate it. I'm so thankful to all of you. Join us back tomorrow morning where we will be back at 9 with something and putting another video together today on something that happened last week, a question period. It'll be a surprise. Not really. Not for those of you who've been actually watching question period. Anyway, thanks you all for coming out. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.